November 2nd, 1996, is a special day for Damien Nettles. He is 16 years old, and that evening he will be allowed to stay out a little later than usual for the first time. Normally, his mother insists that he be home by 10 p.m. at the latest. But on this day, he has finally managed to convince his mother to let him stay out a few hours longer. Until midnight, that's the agreement. A small party is taking place at a few friends' place. There aren't even 10 people there, so it's all pretty laid back. But Damien Nettles won't be going to that party that evening. His path will take him across a ferry, a bustling shopping street, and various pubs. At 12:06 a.m., there will be one last sign of life before Damien Nettles disappears forever. On the Isle of Wight, a popular British vacation spot that is actually known for its idyllic landscapes, but apparently there are secrets on this island. Secrets that remain hidden even 30 years later. Before Damien heads off to the party, he gives his girlfriend a quick call. She lives on the English mainland in Suffolk. It's important to Damien to hear her voice one more time and tell her that he misses her. The Nettles family has settled on the Isle of Wight. It lies off the south coast of Great Britain, across from the port city of Southampton. In the mid-90s, about 120,000 people lived here. For many Brits, the Isle of Wight is a popular tourist destination, though mostly in the summer. During the fall and winter months, the locals largely have the island to themselves. After the phone call with his girlfriend, it doesn't take Damien long to get ready for the party. He simply puts on a pair of comfortable jeans and a black fleece jacket. Damien's father drives him to East Cowes around 7 p.m. That's where Damien's buddy, Chris Boone, lives. From there, the guys set off together for the party at about 7:10 p.m. Davey, Chris's younger brother, is there too. There are 3 couples there that evening. Only Damien is there alone. At some point during the evening, Damien gets his hands on a small black camera. He carries it with him the whole evening, even when he and Chris leave the party around 9:15 p.m. Damien has convinced Chris to hang out with him for a bit longer, since he found the party too boring. They head to All Days, a small shop nearby. Damien buys a few bottles of cider there. The boys take a ferry from East Cowes to West Cowes, which leaves at 9:45 p.m. Witnesses who see the 2 boys on the ferry later describe them as talkative, but the teenagers don't seem really drunk, just relaxed. According to the police report on Damien Nettles' disappearance, it is noted that between his arrival in West Cowes and 12:06 a.m., he visited various pubs on High Street. While 16-year-olds are allowed in a pub to eat if accompanied by an adult, admission is generally restricted to those 18 and older for simply sitting around or drinking alcohol. Chris, who still looks pretty much like a 16-year-old, doesn't stand a chance of getting in anywhere. With Damien, things are a bit different. He's quite tall and could pass for an adult if you don't look too closely. So Chris mostly stays outside while Damien goes from pub to pub. Not to have a drink though, but to ask about his sister, Sarah. Chris reports this later, and a witness from one of the pubs also remembers clearly that this tall teenager came in and asked about a Sarah. The thing is, Damien actually knows full well that Sarah isn't in West Cowes that weekend. She isn't even on the Isle of Wight, but on the mainland in Portsmouth. To this day, no one can say for sure why Damien would have asked about Sarah at the pub. Maybe it was just an excuse to get inside and avoid being kicked out right away. which still leaves the question of how that was supposed to work with Chris. Did Damien just want to buy drinks and take them outside to drink with Chris there? After all, Damien had been able to buy cider quite casually in a shop in East Cowes. He could have just done that again without risking getting kicked out of a pub. At 10 p.m., a witness sees him at the Duke of York pub. Just a few minutes later, a surveillance camera captures Damien entering the Yorkies snack bar. He goes inside, picks up a salt shaker sitting nearby, puts it back, and leaves. 10 minutes later, a witness sees Damien across from this snack bar in front of a venue called The Arcade. Another 10 minutes later, a different witness sees Damien in front of a nearby pub, though without Chris. According to the witness, Damien is sitting in front of the Fountain Pub, eating a serving of fries. This matches what an employee there notices at 10:30 p.m. The employee tells Damien he has to leave as soon as he finishes his fries. As Chris later states, by about this time, he's no longer in the mood for the tour of West Cowes. He's cold, so he suggests to Damien that they head home. The two boys leave the town center together. Just before Northwood Park on Granville Road, they go their separate ways. Chris goes straight home. Damien heads in the exact opposite direction, back toward Cowes High Street, the way he and Chris had just come from. And there he continues his strange tour, as we know from further witness statements. In the evening, there is some activity on Cowes High Street, but not enough that one could simply disappear into a crowd. Given his height, Damien inevitably stands out. And on this evening, it is not only his stature that is noticed, but above all, his strange behavior. Of course, reconstructions based on witness accounts should always be taken with a grain of salt, but I think it's worth it here to follow the timeline directly based on the sightings. According to a BBC report, he apparently seemed intoxicated to many. At 10:45 p.m., Damien is seen by an acquaintance. He's hanging around on High Street and eating another serving of fries. The acquaintance and Damien go together to the Fauna pub, but there, Damien is turned away again. After that, another acquaintance sees the 16-year-old around 11 p.m. as she herself is on her way to the Harbor Lights pub. Damien is seen at this very pub at 11:10 p.m. There, Damien asks a witness for a cigarette. The witness observes Damien then walking toward a blue Ford Fiesta in the Harbor Lights pub parking lot around 11:15 p.m. The car does not belong to Damien, but he is said to have tried to open the car doors. Unsuccessfully, of course. 5 minutes later, Damien shows up at the Three Crowns pub. He tries to get in through the side entrance and claims he's looking for his sister. After that, he goes back to Yorkie's, the snack bar. There he buys another order of fries. Make a special note of this visit to the snack bar. At 11:40 p.m., he is seen at Lloyd's Bank on High Street. At 11:45 p.m., Damien returns to the Harbor Lights pub and asks for cigarettes again. 5 minutes later, a pub employee claims to have seen him outside the shop. Damien is said to be talking to someone sitting in a Ford Fiesta. It is unclear whether this is the same car Damien had previously tried to get into. At around 11:50 p.m., someone sees Damien at a bus stop near the Coop. A bus arrives, and the 16-year-old gets on, but only to speak briefly with the driver. Or rather, to try to take a photo of him with the camera he'd brought from the party. A short time later, just before midnight, Damien catches the eye of another witness. He's sitting hunched over a plate of fries and looks pretty beat up. This witness watches Damien a little longer than the others. He's sitting in his car himself, waiting for his foster son. It's quite likely that he really did see Damien. His description matches Damien's, and he even notices a camera the boy is carrying. Damien also seems to notice that the witness is watching him, because suddenly, he walks straight toward the car. He leans against it and speaks to the driver through the rolled-down window. The teenager seems quite dazed, and the witness will later remember exactly what he says. "They are watching us." After that, Damien heads toward Pierview on High Street. At 12:06 a.m., a surveillance camera on High Street captures him. Then, Damien Nettles disappears and is never seen again. If Damien had tried to walk home from the High Street, he would have had two possible routes. One through the park, where he had said goodbye to Chris earlier. But he could also have walked along the coast. Whether he would have taken that route on the night of November 2nd to 3rd, however, is questionable. It was quite unpleasant, stormy, and rainy. Walking along the coast would have been pretty much the opposite of a relaxing stroll. Wherever Damien ended up after his wanderings down the High Street, he never made it home. The first to notice this on the morning of November 3rd was Damien's younger sister, 9-year-old Melissa. That morning, she discovers that not only is Damien's bed empty, but that he apparently didn't sleep in it at all. Upon making this discovery, Damien's mother, Valerie, first calls Chris. After all, her son had been out with him the night before. But when she hears that Damien didn't spend the night there, she begins to worry greatly. She calls Damien's other friends, but the 16-year-old is nowhere to be found. The family also searches the neighborhood. When all that proves fruitless, Valerie Nettles goes to the local police station around 3 p.m. to file a missing person report. But they don't take immediate action there. Damien's mother will later level serious accusations against the police. In her view, they didn't take her son's disappearance seriously at first. It was she and the rest of the family who went door to door asking if anyone had seen Damien. Furthermore, it is not the police who find the surveillance footage from the night of Damien's disappearance, but a friend of Damien's mother. She is active in local politics and therefore well connected on the island. When she realizes that, according to Valerie, the police are doing almost nothing, she contacts the shop owners along High Street directly to obtain the camera footage. And she succeeds. What's particularly telling here is his longest visit to the snack bar around 11:40 p.m., half an hour before he finally disappears. In the footage, you can not only see, but also hear that something seems off about Damien. After the 16-year-old leaves the snack bar with his fries, the employee who served him talks to a colleague about him. He's certain the guy was on drugs. Damien seems completely out of it in the video. He can't string a coherent sentence together. And this, despite the fact that, before placing his order, he briefly chatted with the 4 customers standing in front of him in the shop. When it's Damien's turn to order, however, he seems to have obvious trouble finding the right words. And half an hour after these recordings were made, all trace of him is lost. However, this is yet another instance where the police do not act immediately. The Nettles' friend, who discovered the recordings, naturally passes them on to the investigators. But when they watch the video, they apparently conclude that the interaction between Damien and the other customers looks harmless. It wasn't until years later that the 5 men were questioned after an internal review revealed that no one had ever spoken to them. So they made up for it, albeit belatedly. So late, in fact, that their memories may have long since faded. About half an hour after he visited the snack bar, a public security camera captured Damien on the High Street at 12:06 a.m. However, this final video has since disappeared from police custody. That must be particularly painful for the family. After all, those were the last images showing Damien alive. Now they are lost, according to official reports, just like the 16-year-old himself. According to the police, a formal investigation was launched to quickly solve the mystery of Damien's disappearance. However, some oversights are clear. Important police documents are also no longer traceable. For example, the log of calls received by the island police on the night of Damien's disappearance. The same goes for various police reports and even records of which officers were on duty that night. Even though the police did little at first, it is crystal clear to Damien's family that something terrible must have happened to him. His family considers it out of the question that Damien simply ran away from home. After all, he had absolutely nothing with him apart from the camera he took from the house party. Incidentally, that camera has never turned up either. Damien also could not have left the Isle of Wight on the evening of his disappearance. The ferries to the mainland were no longer running at that late hour, so whatever happened must have happened on the island. First of all, according to Damien's family, the police have a very clear idea of what happened to the 16-year-old. It's a plausible theory that could go some way toward explaining why the search efforts are said to have had so many gaps. The story goes that, for whatever reason, Damien Nettles likely did take the route home along the water's edge, and that he fell and drowned in the process. This fits with the fact that High Street and the coast are right next to each other. It would only take a few seconds to stumble from the street to the water's edge and, if necessary, fall in. Off the coast of Cowes lies one of the busiest waterways on the British coast. Cowes is situated directly on the Solent, the strait between the Isle of Wight and the British mainland. Damien's family contacted the harbor master so that he could offer his expert assessment. So he set about studying the nautical charts and tables. The harbor master calculated the tidal movements, the tidal currents, and their speeds, and reached a clear conclusion. If Damien had really fallen into the water on the night of November 2nd to 3rd, the current would have carried his body back to shore. The water was, of course, freezing cold in November, so it can take a few days longer for a body to wash ashore, as cold water slows down many of the processes that cause a body to resurface. Yet, throughout November and beyond, Damien's body was never washed ashore. A search by boat along the island's coast also yielded no results. The harbor master actually considers it impossible that Damien could have been swept into the English Channel. But what else could have happened to Damien? In 1999, one of the rumors surrounding Damien's disappearance reached the police. A serial predator is said to have lived on the island in 1996. There is speculation that Damien may have fallen victim to him. Investigators follow this lead. However, it turns out that the man left the Isle of Wight several months before Damien's disappearance, so this theory is ruled out. A lead from 2002 points in a similar direction. A man came forward to the police himself, claiming he had been involved in a murder on the Isle of Wight in the 1990s. He apparently provided such specific details that the police subsequently searched a field on the island, though without success. It was later determined that the man had most likely been lying. It is quite curious that the speculation and rumors surrounding abuse as a motive do not end there. A friend of Damien's claims that Damien later became the victim of an abuse that proved fatal. He was then buried near Northwood House. However, at the time of this claim, this friend had slipped into drug addiction. Later, he denied ever having said that. Yet another rumor from the island claims that Damien intervened when his friend was about to be abused. As a result, he may have been beaten up and died. Here, however, it wasn't even possible to figure out where this rumor came from or how and when it spread. I think there's no question that Damien behaved rather strangely on the evening of his disappearance, so people in his circle are being asked whether anyone had noticed anything unusual about Damien in the months leading up to it. And his ex-girlfriend Abby actually has something to report. She was with Damien for a year and a half until they broke up in July '96. Abby says that toward the end of the relationship, she noticed that Damien had changed somehow. She reports, "I saw traits in him that belonged to someone else. He was hanging out with a different group of people who were a bit older than him. There were obviously things he kept to himself. It might have been about drugs. I don't know." A few weeks after breaking up with Abby, Damien had already started dating Gemma, his girlfriend from the mainland. She, in turn, told the BBC that Abby's suspicion that drugs might have been involved was never investigated. At least, Gemma was never questioned about it. This didn't really come to light until 2002, 6 years after Damien's disappearance, when another police department took over the investigation. And around the same time, an informant contacted the investigators. He claims to have been in close contact in the 1990s with a man named Nicky McNamara, a local drug dealer on the Isle of Wight. Apparently, the man suggests that this McNamara might have had something to do with Damien's disappearance, as he is said to have dealt drugs in the High Street area, particularly in pubs. This fits Damien's movements that night almost eerily well. One witness even claims to have seen Nicky McNamara on the High Street in Cowes late in the evening of Damien's disappearance, exactly where the boy was last seen. The same witness claims to have observed McNamara on the afternoon of the following day as he lit a large fire in an old oil drum. He saw McNamara adding wood to the fire, but also something else that he dragged behind him and then picked up from the ground. Something that looked like a sleeve or an arm. Years later, the informant even contacted Damien's mother, Valerie, personally. He felt that the police hadn't taken him seriously. The man claims to know that Damien is no longer alive. Nicky McNamara allegedly killed him accidentally during an argument. According to this account, Damien McNamara apparently owed money for weed, and a confrontation occurred on November 2nd. Furthermore, the informant states that Damien's body was kept in a drug hideout in Cowes for about 3 weeks. Afterward, they placed him in a sailing bag and buried him along a bike path. The Nettles go to the police themselves to find out if this had been investigated. In fact, a bike path on the island is searched. However, the police warn Damien's family not to place too much trust in the informant. The man is simply not reliable. Searches had already been conducted based on the information he provided. When nothing was found, the informant changed his story. However, the lead involving McNamara is being thoroughly investigated. A friend of McNamara's, Bunny Isles, is even briefly taken into custody and his apartment searched. McNamara himself died of an overdose in 2002. It wasn't until after his death that his name was even linked to Damien's disappearance. Bunny Isles, on the other hand, met with Damien's mother in the mid-2000s for a conversation that was also filmed. During the meeting, Bunny promises Damien's mother that he is 101% certain he had nothing to do with her son's disappearance, and he is certain that Nicky McNamara wasn't involved in the matter either. After McNamara's death, there were rumors that he had made a confession before his death. This is unlikely, however, since he died in the bathroom of a house known on the island as the House of Death, as mentioned, from an overdose. At the time, the house belonged to a woman named Shirley, who has something of an ominous, legendary status on the island. She is known to the police, and everyone on the island knows that it's best not to mess with her. Just like McNamara himself, she was apparently part of the local drug scene in the 90s. She denies that McNamara told her anything about Damien Nettles before his death. She herself was so high that she reportedly didn't realize McNamara was dead until 3 days later. When reporters ask Shirley about the night of McNamara's death, she doesn't feel like talking about it. However, she also implies that there were other people there besides her and McNamara. But Shirley won't reveal any names or further details. Her position is nevertheless quite clear. She knows nothing about Damien Nettles. Nevertheless, the evidence pointing to McNamara continues to mount. A local resident has stated that he saw Nicky McNamara push a boy against a wall on Baths Hill around the time Damien disappeared. However, this resident did not speak to the police until 2005, 9 years after Damien's disappearance and 3 years after McNamara's death. He points to another man named Daniel Spencer, who is also said to have witnessed the incident. Spencer, in turn, is an acquaintance of Nicky McNamara. For a BBC documentary, journalists track down 10 of Daniel Spencer's acquaintances. They suspect he knows something about the alleged death of Daniel Nettles. When he is drunk, Daniel Spencer is said to often talk about Damien. On one occasion, he is said to have remarked in this context, "No body, no crime." One of the acquaintances claims that Daniel Spencer gained access to confidential police files. Spencer is said to have obtained, for example, the statement transcript stating that he was present when McNamara pushed Damien against a wall. When journalists began asking how someone like Spencer could have access to such confidential investigative documents, the police department in charge declined to comment. Daniel Spencer himself, however, denies having any information about Damien's disappearance. It should also be noted that Nicky McNamara is no stranger to Damien's family. Damien actually has a younger brother named James. Years after Damien's disappearance, James was at a party as a young teenager. McNamara suddenly showed up there. He asked someone else who James was. When he was told that he was James Nettles, McNamara reportedly became nervous and demanded that the host kick James and his friends out. Damien's friend Chris, who was out with him that night, says, by the way, that he's absolutely certain Damien didn't know Nicky McNamara and therefore never bought drugs from him. But apparently, he did from Bunny Isles. So, in principle, it's possible that Bunny might have referred Damien to McNamara at some point when he didn't have anything to sell himself. It seems that Bunny lived in a shared apartment for a while, and Chris believes that's where Damien got his weed. His roommate, Nicky McNamara. Bunny Isles, Nicky McNamara, and Daniel Spencer apparently all belonged to a sort of drug clique. The only question is whether these adults could really have had such a violent argument with a 16-year-old that he ended up dying. What I do wonder, however, even if we assume the rumors are true that McNamara allegedly killed Damien on November 2nd during an argument, is what about Damien's behavior beforehand? Why was he going from pub to pub? If there's any truth to the McNamara theory, maybe Damien was even looking for McNamara in the pubs to score more weed, or maybe some other drugs? But why does he suddenly seem so high when he visits the Yorkies snack bar? What happened between saying goodbye to his buddy Chris and those snack bar footage? Did he get his hands on any substances? And if so, from whom? Unfortunately, I doubt we'll ever find out. In the early 2000s, there were several arrests in the case. However, the names and grounds for suspicion were never disclosed. Only the following key details are known. In May 2011, 5 men were taken into custody on suspicion of murder. 4 of the men were from the Isle of Wight, and 1 was from the mainland in the county of Kent. At the time of Damien's disappearance, the youngest of them was 22 years old, and the oldest was 35. In July, another man from the island, who was 23 at the time, was arrested. In November 2011, a man and a woman were also taken into custody on suspicion of conspiracy to murder. As mentioned, the identities are unfortunately unknown. However, the woman is at least not Shirley, Nicky McNamara's girlfriend. So, in 2011, we suddenly have 8 arrests in the Damien Nettles case. But unfortunately, not a single one of these arrests led to an indictment. And that is why it is still unclear what happened to Damien. 5 years after Damien's disappearance without a trace, his family left the Isle of Wight. The Nettles now live in Dallas. But even from a distance, 30 years later, Damien's mother is still tirelessly trying to solve her son's case. Despite the move, she has kept Damien's belongings, his stuffed animals as well as his Christmas stocking, which still hangs by the fireplace every year alongside those of his siblings. Although Damien has been missing for nearly 30 years, he still shapes every single day of their lives, as Valerie describes it. As she reports, the police have since apologized for the investigative failures and admitted that Damien was most likely the victim of a crime. For Valerie, Damien's father, and his sisters, this is likely only a small consolation. Much of what has been uncovered is based on hearsay and only came to light years after Damien's disappearance. If so many people supposedly knew something, it's surprising that they only spoke up so late. I'm curious to hear your theories on the case. Feel free to share your thoughts in the comments, because any interaction increases the likelihood that the video will be recommended to people who haven't subscribed to Insolito yet. Other than that, there isn't much more to say. I hope you're having a good morning, afternoon, or evening, whichever time you're watching this, and I hope to see you again in the next video. Until then, ciao everyone.